You're listening to Skills World Live with Tom Bewick. News, views and interviews in association with FE News. Gillian Keegan, can we start by clearing up some of the confusion about the Apprenticeship Data Services Bulletin that the government publishes? Last week, the .gov website announced that these regular bulletins were being cancelled, at least until November. Then within 24 hours, an amendment to the site was made suggesting the government was backtracking on that decision. Why was that?
Well, there was no sort of big announcements or backtracking. Basically, we will continue to publish headline statistics. But what we'd done previously is we'd advertised dates that we were going to be publishing those on. And actually, it was just straightforward, really, that in response to coronavirus and the pandemic, there probably are some delays in terms of getting some of the data from various sources. So
right, I see.
we just basically put in place a temporary measure which said, we're not going to be doing that on these dates, and we're going to be compiling the data in a slightly different way.
Okay.
But there's no intention to not publish apprenticeship starts. I mean, we've been publishing them for I don't know how long. And there's, of course, the sector we all need to know and need to look at apprenticeship starts. So, I mean, the communication may not have been the best in the best order, but certainly there's no intention to not publish information.
Okay, well, that's definitely, I think, cleared up some of the confusion that was out there. In fact, as ever in the skills world, there's always the odd conspiracy theory that there's somehow a decision, first of all, made by officials and then it was overruled by ministers. But I think you've been very clear on the line this evening what the position is. Moving on to starts then, I mean, how concerned are you as Skills and Apprenticeship Minister of the continued fall in starts? I mean, they are well below now the pre-levy 2017 numbers, and indeed they started to decline in the last quarter, even before the current lockdown crisis began. I think I would take that question in two parts. Sure.
Pre-coronavirus, how worried was I about the falls in apprenticeships? Probably not necessarily that worried, because we deliberately had introduced some reforms into apprenticeships, which meant they're longer, they're more rigorous, there's quality is now assessed by independent organisations. And the result of that has meant, that there's been a slight decline in starts, some people were exiting the market, etc. But as a result of that, we were getting a much higher quality apprenticeship. And I feel very strongly about, every young person deserves to have a high quality apprenticeship. So I was less worried because the quality was going up with some of the numbers going down. However, that's the pre-corona answer. I am extremely worried about the impact on apprenticeship starts as a result of coronavirus. Clearly, many businesses that take on a great number of apprentices, or even just a number of apprentices, but by sector it adds up to a lot of businesses, are going through unprecedented times. They've had their sort of income turned off almost overnight. They're making all kinds of decisions, and I am worried that new starts on apprenticeships will be further down the list than some of the other business decisions they have to make in these unprecedented times. So I think one is about the overall kind of what was happening after we introduced the quality reforms, and I would always prioritise quality over quantity, always, because each apprenticeship is a young person's or even an older person's life opportunity, really, to get on in the workplace. So that has to be high quality. Yeah. But the the impact of coronavirus is extremely worrying, and there is no doubt it will have an impact on apprenticeship starts.
Okay, well, let's come on to that in a moment. I mean, you talked there about the focus of the government being on quality, not quantity. But when you look at the profile, the breakdown of the starts of people taking apprenticeships in England today, does it concern you that the only area where the numbers appear to have been growing is for those existing employees who are often over the age of 25 and well-paid managers doing MBAs who, until November at least, will be able to continue to enjoy those high-level courses at taxpayers' expense?
I think that question's slightly confused. So the first thing is, am I worried that people are getting the opportunity to use an apprenticeship to upskill or retrain if they're in a business? No, I'm not. Having been somebody who, did an apprenticeship in a business and, went all the way through the levels up to level 6. I think it's a great way into the workplace, and, it's something that is, it's a good way for businesses to make sure they have the skilled employees that they need. So that's specifically. Now, you kind of added in the MBA bit as well. I must say, there is a review going on about the MBA apprenticeships in particular. And I was slightly surprised to see the MBA apprenticeship when I turned up at the job 2 months ago, because I did go on to do an MBA equivalent. Actually, it was at London Business School, a Sloan Fellowship. It was a very expensive qualification, but it wouldn't have ever struck me that I could have used an apprenticeship route to do that. I paid for that myself, or quite often the model is you pay for half and your employer pays for half, and I've indeed sponsored many employees to do their MBA in that way. So I was slightly surprised actually to see it there as an apprenticeship. But that's a review that's going on at the moment, which, they're looking at it to see whether that is good value for money or not. Yeah. But that's very separate from the young person, 25-year-old, I think, used the example, using an apprenticeship to upskill. And even retrain. There's some amazing examples of people who've worked for many years in a business, potentially in a job that was really just a job, and they've been given the opportunity to do an apprenticeship. And I met somebody recently in our local hospital who's been a cleaner actually in the hospital for a long time, 20 years I think she said, and she's just completed her apprenticeship to be a paediatric nurse, and that is exactly what the scheme is there for.
Right. You said earlier that obviously the government's intention is for a higher quality programme, and indeed the new standards that have been introduced over the past few years are evidence of that. But they have been running alongside the old apprenticeship frameworks, which I think most people in the sector accept is a kind of inferior product to the standards. There is some talk, though, that the old frameworks could be extended, despite the fact the Institute put the sector on notice last summer that these would be switched off by August the 1st. Where is the government on the whole issue of extending frameworks beyond the July 31st deadline?
Well, a lot of the sort of old frameworks have already moved to standards. I think we're over 75% now are already on standards, and that's continuing. And we think a lot of the sector have been ready, as you say. They've been given 18 months notice, I think, of this impending change. So, much of the sector is on course to do that. However, of course, we are going to be reviewing things in light of coronavirus, and, I'm waiting to see advice on that. But from what I understand, a lot of sectors already have moved. I think pretty much all sectors have examples where they've moved to standards. So I think, there's great leadership being shown, and it looks like the vast majority of the sector have been able to do this and are continuing to do it now. So it looks like, as you usually get in this case, there may be a few laggards at the end, but the vast majority are on course to do this. Okay. And, as you say, standards are well recognised as being, of a higher quality, and certainly, have a lot more confidence of employers and businesses. And that's the most important thing. If we don't move to this, then effectively a young person's doing potentially an apprenticeship that employers may not have the same view of in terms of understanding the quality of it. So I think it's very important. I always look at this from the young person, from the learners, from the apprentice's viewpoint. What's best for the apprentice? As sooner we can get onto standards, it's much better for the apprentice.
Gillian Keegan, England's Skills and Apprenticeships Minister. Pleasure talking to you. Thanks for coming on Skills World this evening.
Subscribe to Skills World Live at fenews.co.uk/Skills World.